For half a century, people in East Boston have been living in a zone of conflict between two worlds, the neighborhood and the airport. In recent years, the conflict has been more subdued, but that could soon change with plans for the airport to go through a new round of expansion. And that sets the stage for a new documentary about the neighborhood and Logan Airport. It's called Destination East Boston. We'd like to welcome two environmental activists who worked on the film, the director Magdalena and co-producer Chris Marchi. Thank you both for pretty much being with us.
Thank you for having us.
I want to hear each of you talk about your story, your journey to this destination here, and starting with Chris. You're an Eastie native, so what was your story?
Well, born and bred in this issue. My family was active since the very beginning. Wood Island Park was taken when I was 2 years old, and that was really a major shock to the neighborhood. And after that, organizing began, and it's been ongoing ever since.
Now, I also tend to think of that as the really, really bad old days, I mean, houses being demolished, bureaucrats versus angry people in the neighborhoods. I mean, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the destruction was pretty significant back in the 60s and early 70s. But you know, the cultural attitude that the airport has continues today. The last house they took was in 2012, I believe, at 20 Neptune Road. So they were demolishing houses up until just a few years ago, and demolishing neighborhood businesses as well.
Turning to Magdalena, these seem to be maybe less contentious times. You're a relative newcomer, but what's it been like with you, with this airport in your neighborhood now?
Yes, so I'm not a native of Boston, but I planted my roots here. I decided to raise a family here, and I became very connected through a lot of the community activism, and I also suffer the environmental impacts. And raising children really brings this to the forefront, you know, being a mother and sort of in the noise pollution and air pollution, and seeing the tankers going by the harbor, and you just say to yourself, you know, there's something more we can do. It can't possibly be that we are suffering these kinds of impacts, and yet people are struggling day to day, and there's not enough of a voice or enough of a medium to actually tell the story.
Well, we're going to bring up a little excerpt from the documentary about some of those environmental impacts on people's health.
With the airport now proven to cause a 360% increase in probable childhood asthma, with it already been proven to cause COPD 200% more likely, and my father has COPD, and my children were all given inhalers.
Are we already at dangerous levels of pollution? If we are, we need to stop.
With all that we know, it is irresponsible to expand those impacts without attempting to do what you can do. We can't leave those things on the floor.
Chris, talk about the effects on the environment here, because people might say, well, you know, it's just there. I mean, they don't see the problems. You know, it's invisible, this kind of pollution. So, is this a really big deal?
It is a really big deal, Chris. So, over the past 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, a lot of the script and the narrative around the airport struggle has been around noise. But thanks to modern science, that is now changing. Airport Impact Relief Incorporated is the neighborhood watchdog group, which is founded and based in East Boston, but we have a regional reach. And over the decades, we've collaborated with other communities across the region. We have launched a few years ago our public health initiative. And as part of that initiative, we have brought together in the month of November this year what we call Airport Impacts 101. It was a day-long forum in which we brought in experts in research science around the topics of airport-related impacts so that they could give presentations to the community and explain what the true impacts of the airport are. So it's not only noise and it's not only annoyance, but noise and annoyance cause chronic disease like heart disease and hypertension and high blood pressure. The pollution from the airport is another very significant impact, which we're learning more and more about now. Now we know that airport profile pollution is measurable in 100% increases as far as 12 miles out from the source in airports. So this is really not just an East Boston problem. This is a regional public health problem. It is already known that Logan Airport produces 360% increase in probable childhood asthma, which is basically undiagnosed asthma. right? We already know that the airport produces a 200% increase in COPD. So with what's known, and at the health forum, we learned that the airport can also be attributed to increases in autism, increases in stroke. So how are we going to grow this airport?
Magdalena, with the expectations for what, a 40% plus expansion, that means more air traffic and more traffic getting to the airport. What do you expect to see, the effect on people?
I mean, we're already a gridlock. I mean, if you drive in and around East Boston, within our streets, it's just gridlock. It's too much traffic congestion. We have, I don't know what the rate is, but we have a lot of accidents happening in our streets. There's a lot of noise disturbance at night. And so if you talk about expanding this airport, having more flights, from the hours of 10 p.m. to 5 a.m., I mean, those are crucial hours for families to get their rest. So with traffic congestion, an increase in air pollution, with an proven facts that the health impacts are increasing as well. We can't just sit back and, feel powerless. We really need to figure out a way where we can say, hey, you know what, it's okay. I travel internationally too. I have family all over the world. But let's mitigate this in a way that it could be a win-win situation. But we can't continue on this path of expansion without further serious environmental mitigation.
We're talking with Magdalena Ayad and Chris Marchi from Destination East Boston. Chris, so what are the choices here? I mean, are you going to just, totally cap the growth of the airport, or is there some way to let them grow and sort of mitigate all these problems?
Well, the history of the community activism around Logan Airport has not been one of sort of knee-jerk trying to stop the growth of the region. Our community's done its fair share and continues to do its fair share. Boston neighborhoods are really the engine of our economy. They're really the whole point here. It's not the airport. The airport will tell you they're the engine of the economy. Question again?
Well, can you do something that would allow some growth and at the same time not punish the neighborhood?
Yeah, absolutely. So our intention isn't to stop the airport from serving the international traveler in the issue with the Terminal E expansions that they're proposing. Our issue is to say, look, if you're going to need to bring in 5, 6, 7 million more passengers, then you're going to need to figure out how to do that without increasing unacceptable impacts on Boston's neighborhoods. And we're just the primary neighborhood, but the impacts are felt in Southie, the impacts are felt in Chelsea and Revere and in Winthrop and Roxbury, Milton. This is a regional problem. So what we're saying is do it if you need to do it, because we are all for economic growth in this region, but do it in a sensible way. And that's where I think they're failing today.
Magdalena, talk about directing this documentary, because you had to round people up, do some homework, and make the schedules work. Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say that this idea came about because being an activist and being very, tied into the activism around not just the airport, but other environmental issues, I felt that there was a need to really tell this story. I mean, it's a story of 50 years, and it was all sort of in little bits and pieces, and so the community doesn't have this clear picture where they can look at this film and understand it, in an hour. And that's what this film really does. And it's captivating when you look at it, and I invite people to look at it. But for me, I said, I'm already very embedded in the activism, very closely tied to a lot of the folks in East Boston who either were longtime activists or are currently working on projects. And I pulled together, my brother lives out in New Jersey, and he's a film cinematographer. I called them up, I said, you know what, let's do a film. We got a little budget. We called key people to interview. We talked about who to interview, where to interview, site location. Putting it together wasn't easy, and also doing the research online. I learned a lot from doing this film. I discovered I would be up at 2 o'clock in the morning when I knew I had to work the next day, but finding things that I knew were just so perfect for, to insert in film montages, so.
Finally, Magdalena, if people want to see this, do you have a place online they can go to?
Yes, absolutely. We set up a web page specifically for the film. It's called easty.weebly.com. It's easty.weebly.com, and you could just click on the link. Please share it around. It's online. We hope you like it.
Thank you both very much, Magdalena Ayad and Chris Marchi.
Thank you.
Up ahead, helping the needy through social enterprise. We'll hear about a new initiative at Project Place.